My name is Emma Cole, and I grew up in a red brick house on Birch Lane, just outside Savannah, Georgia, America. The house wasn't large, but it had character. A wide porch that wrapped around like a warm arm, a creaky wooden swing that groaned under summer humidity, and a maple tree that shed its leaves in golden piles every fall. I used to sit on those steps and imagine the world beyond our street, where life didn't feel so small or so quiet. My father, Richard Cole, was a man who believed in discipline more than affection. He wasn't cruel, but he was sharp, his words clipped, his judgments final. He worked as a property appraiser, spending his days valuing other people's homes while never noticing the cracks in his own family. After my mother passed away when I was 16, everything changed. Her laughter used to fill the house like light through glass. When she was gone, silence took her place. It wasn't long before my father remarried. Her name was Cynthia, a woman from Columbus, Ohio, with glossy blonde hair and an endless rotation of pearl earrings. She brought her daughter, Lila, into our home, a girl a year younger than me, with a perfect smile that fooled nearly everyone. My father adored her from the beginning. He said she was polite, respectful, graceful, all the things he thought I wasn't. To him, I was stubborn, outspoken, too determined for my own good. To Cynthia, I was simply a problem she hadn't chosen. I tried to make peace at first. I remember helping Lila unpack her things, her collection of porcelain dolls and her dresses that smelled faintly of lavender. She thanked me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. That was the last time we shared kindness without competition. When I graduated from high school, I wanted to go to New York for college, but my father refused to help. "You'll stay close to home," he said, his voice firm. "You don't need big cities filling your head with nonsense." I took that as a challenge. I worked part-time at a small diner off Highway 80, saving every dollar in a coffee tin under my bed. 2 years later, I packed a single suitcase, took a bus north, and never looked back. I landed in Chicago, where the winter winds cut through my coat like knives. My first job was at the Riverside Grand Hotel, folding sheets in the laundry room. I can still remember the smell, bleach, fresh cotton, and faint perfume from the guests. I worked nights, studying the front desk clerks and how they spoke to guests with grace and confidence. During breaks, I watched the managers glide through the lobby in tailored suits, their names stitched in gold on their badges. I told myself, one day that will be me. It wasn't easy. I worked double shifts, took night classes in business administration, and learned everything I could about hospitality. Most people thought I was just another small-town girl chasing a city dream. They didn't see the notebooks I filled with ideas, the budgets I practiced balancing, or the way I memorized every detail about how the hotel ran, from how they ordered wine to how they handled complaints. That's when I met Peter Vaughn. He was a quiet, older man from Boston, a frequent guest who stayed at the hotel for months at a time. One evening, when I was cleaning up near the bar, he asked me what I wanted out of life. No one had ever asked me that before, not seriously. I told him the truth. I want to build something that belongs entirely to me. He smiled, stirring his drink. "You've got the eyes of someone who will," he said. "You just don't know how yet." Over the years, Peter became a mentor of sorts. He taught me about cash flow, investments, and how to read contracts like a lawyer. I learned to trust numbers more than promises. We stayed in touch long after he left Chicago, writing letters and later emails. I told him about every promotion, every setback, every victory. By 28, I was an assistant manager. By 31, I was managing an entire property in Denver. But deep down, I knew I wanted more, not just a job, but ownership. I began scouting opportunities quietly, keeping my dreams close. I didn't tell my father. He wouldn't have believed me anyway. Then came a cold January morning when Peter called with a tip. "There's a hotel on the Chicago River, struggling but with good bones," he said. "It needs someone with vision and courage." I spent 3 nights running the numbers. The building had history, charm, and potential. The asking price was astronomical, just over $1,320,000,000, but I had connections now, investors who believed in me and Peter's guidance. Against every doubt, I made an offer. 6 months later, I walked through the doors of the Aurora Grand, no longer a guest or an employee, but the owner. The walls smelled of fresh paint and new beginnings. I hired a staff of people who reminded me of myself, hardworking, unseen, hungry for a chance. We renovated every floor, every suite. We added glass balconies overlooking the river and marble floors that reflected the chandeliers like stars. I didn't put my name on the plaque out front. I wanted my success to speak quietly. In my office, overlooking the city skyline, I often thought about Birch Lane. I wondered if my father ever drove past my old room, still painted soft yellow, and thought of me. I doubted it. Cynthia had probably replaced the curtains, and Lila had probably moved into my old space by now. It didn't matter. The world I had built was far from the narrow streets of Savannah. Still, I sometimes missed the sound of the porch swing, the way the maple leaves rustled in late October. I missed my mother's voice calling me for dinner. But I also knew that every bruise from that house had built the spine I carried now. Owning the Aurora Grand wasn't just about money. It was about freedom, the kind I dreamed of when I was folding sheets in the basement laundry room. The hotel was more than a business. It was my declaration to the world that I could rise above everything that tried to contain me. I didn't tell anyone in my family about it. Let them think I was just doing well in the city. Let them keep their assumptions. Sometimes silence is the most elegant revenge. But life, as I would soon learn, has a strange way of circling back. The people who dismissed you, who laughed at your ambition, often find their way back into your story, usually when it's least convenient for them. I didn't know it then, but one Christmas night, that very hotel would host a family gathering unlike any other. And the truth, like the snow that falls in Chicago, would not stay hidden forever. The snow fell thick over Chicago that Christmas Eve, the kind that silences the city and makes even the traffic lights seem slow to blink. From my office window on the top floor of the Aurora Grand, I could see the river glittering beneath the ice, wrapped in lights that reflected the colors of the season: red, gold, and white. Inside, warmth pulsed through the walls, music, laughter, and the low hum of guests arriving for the most elaborate Christmas party the hotel had ever hosted. No one in my family knew the truth, that the shining building around them belonged to me. For them, it was just a high-end venue in the heart of the city, one chosen by my father's second wife, Cynthia, who loved to flaunt her taste and connections. When I saw their names on the guest list, I said nothing. I wanted to see what time and pride had done to them. I wanted to know if they had changed, or if they still looked through me as if I were a ghost from their past. The ballroom had been transformed into a winter garden. A Christmas tree soared 2 stories high, wrapped in silver ribbons, its branches heavy with crystal ornaments that shimmered beneath the chandeliers. At the center of the room stood an ice sculpture of an angel, carved by one of the best artists in America, its wings stretched wide. The pianist in the corner played Silent Night, while waiters moved between guests, serving glasses of champagne and small plates of truffle hors d'oeuvres. I wore a black velvet dress that draped just below my knees and a silver chain around my wrist. It was simple, deliberate. I didn't need to announce my success. The marble floor beneath me already carried my name in its foundation contracts. Nora Briggs, my event manager from Portland, handled the evening's flow effortlessly, greeting guests, checking details, and giving me a knowing smile whenever our eyes met. She was one of the few who knew my secret, that I was not just another guest, but the silent owner of every light in that room. My father arrived last, of course. Richard Cole, ever the man who needed to make an entrance, was wearing a navy suit and a red silk tie that screamed confidence. Beside him was Cynthia, wrapped in fur, her perfume strong enough to mark her path. And behind them trailed Lila, my stepsister, the golden child of Birch Lane, dressed in a silver gown that matched the glittering shoes I was sure cost more than most people's rent. They spotted me quickly. My father's expression tightened. Lila smiled politely, her eyes darting away just as fast. Cynthia gave me a look of quiet triumph, as if simply being at his side made her the rightful queen of the evening. "Emma," my father said, his voice smooth but cold, "I wasn't expecting to see you here." "I like surprises," I said, returning his tone with a soft smile. He looked around, taking in the opulence, the crowd of businessmen, politicians, and executives who had come to celebrate. He had no idea that every detail of this event, from the champagne brand to the carolers outside, had been approved by me. It was almost poetic. For the first hour, I kept to myself, greeting guests, enjoying the music, and occasionally catching glimpses of my father holding court among his friends. He had always been a man who measured worth by appearance, by power, by control. And tonight, he looked entirely in his element, until he called for everyone's attention. He stood near the ice angel, raising his glass high. "Friends, family," he began, his deep voice commanding silence. "I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. It's been a year of changes for the Cole family, new beginnings, hard lessons, and moments of clarity." People turned toward him, their faces lit by the golden glow of the chandeliers. My stomach nodded slightly, though I kept my smile fixed. I could feel where this was going. Richard continued, "As some of you know, I've been updating my will. It's important at my age to make sure one's legacy is properly cared for. So tonight, I'd like to share that decision." Cynthia's hand slid into his, and Lila lowered her eyes demurely. The pianist's fingers faltered slightly on the keys, catching the tension that filled the room. "I've decided," my father said, his eyes sweeping the crowd, "that my estate, our family home, the properties in Savannah and Nashville, and all other holdings, will pass to my daughter, Lila. She has proven herself loyal, respectable, and, most of all, grateful." A low murmur rippled through the guests. I stood perfectly still. "As for Emma," he added, his tone tightening, "she has chosen her own path, far from family, far from duty. She will not be included in my will." The words struck like glass shattering inside me, but only for a second. I had expected this. What I hadn't expected was the way he turned, looked directly at me, and said, "You should leave, Emma. This evening is for family." Then, with a snap of authority, he gestured toward the two security guards standing at the edge of the hall. "Gentlemen," he said, "please escort her out." The air thinned. The music stopped. Every pair of eyes turned to me. But Marcus Reed and Joel Carter, my security, my men, did not move. They looked at me instead, waiting. For a moment, no one breathed. My father frowned, confused by their hesitation. "What are you waiting for?" he barked. I took a step forward, the click of my heels echoing across the marble floor. "They're waiting," I said quietly, "because they don't take orders from you." Whispers darted through the room like sparks. "What?" my father demanded. I smiled, calm and sure. "You see, Dad," I said, my voice steady. "This isn't your party. It's mine." Gasps filled the hall. Cynthia's face went pale beneath her makeup. Lila looked frozen, her hand clutching her glass so tightly I thought it might crack. "This hotel, the Aurora Grand, belongs to me," I continued. "Every light, every floor, every paycheck. Even the guards you just tried to order around." My father's expression twisted between disbelief and anger. "You're lying." I turned slightly toward Nora, who stood by the entrance, holding a folder. "Would you please?" I asked. Nora opened it, reading from the top. "According to public records and the hotel's own charter, the sole owner and majority shareholder of the Aurora Grand Corporation is Emma Cole," she said, her voice clear and professional. "Valued at over $1,320 million as of this quarter." The ballroom fell silent. Even the lights seemed to hum quieter. My father's mouth opened, then closed. Cynthia blinked rapidly, her confidence crumbling. Lila's silver shoes gleamed under the lights, her eyes wide and uncertain. I took a long breath and looked at them all, the people who had once made me feel small. "So," I said softly, "if anyone's being escorted out tonight, it won't be me." Marcus and Joel stepped forward, not roughly, but firmly, guiding my father and his wife toward the door. Guests parted to let them pass. Some looked away, others stared, unable to believe what they were seeing. I didn't gloat. I didn't raise my voice. I just watched the truth settle over them like snow, quiet, cold, and undeniable. When the doors finally closed behind them, the music started again, low and hesitant at first. I turned toward the tree, its lights shimmering in perfect silence, and whispered to myself, "Merry Christmas." That night, I realized power didn't need to shout. It only needed to stand its ground. The room went still after my words. My father's hand was frozen midair, and his voice, usually sharp and commanding, had fallen away. The only sound came from the soft hum of the chandeliers and the faint hiss of snow against the windows. I felt the silence press in, but for once, it didn't frighten me. It felt like power. I took a slow step forward, my heels echoing across the marble. "You heard me," I said, steady and clear. "Not me. It's all of you who will get out of here." The crowd gasped. The guards my father had tried to order, Marcus Reed and Joel Carter, stood perfectly still, waiting for me, their real employer. I turned to Evelyn Park, our poised manager from Dallas, who stood by the front desk holding a folder. "Evelyn," I said, "tell them who owns this place." Evelyn raised her chin and opened the folder. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice calm but strong. "The Aurora Grand Hotel, including all operational assets, is wholly owned by Miss Emma Cole, sole shareholder of Aurora Holdings, valued at over $1.3 billion. The ballroom fell silent. My father blinked, the truth striking him harder than any slap could have. Cynthia's perfect smile dissolved. Lila, my stepsister, looked at me as if she were seeing a stranger. "You own this," she whispered. "All of it?" "Yes," I said softly. "Every inch of it." My father's face twisted with disbelief. "You're lying." "You couldn't have." "I did," I interrupted. "While you were busy teaching me that I'd never be enough, I was building something you could never imagine." The weight of my words hit him. His voice grew harsher. "You think money gives you the right to humiliate your own family?" I met his eyes. "You did that to me first years ago. I'm simply not playing the victim anymore." I looked to Marcus. "Please escort our guests out," I said quietly. "Start with Mr. Richard Cole and his family." Cynthia's mouth dropped open. "You can't be serious," she hissed. "This is your father. Your family." "My family," I said, "forgot me when it was convenient." Lila stepped forward, tears glimmering in her eyes. "Emma, please. I didn't know he was cutting you out of the will. I didn't ask for this." "I'm sorry." I almost wanted to believe her. But the memory of her standing beside Cynthia when they cleared my mother's things from that house in Savannah was still sharp in my mind. "You watched it all," I said softly. "And you stayed quiet. I learned silence from you, Lila, but I've outgrown it." The guards began moving toward my father, who backed up a step. "You'll regret this," he warned, his voice trembling now. "You can have your hotel, your money, but you'll be alone." I nodded once. Alone is better than small. Cynthia's eyes flashed. "You're cruel," she spat. "No," I said. "I'm just done being kind to people who mistake kindness for weakness." The guards gestured toward the door. The guests began to part, murmuring in disbelief. Some avoided my gaze. Others looked at me with something close to admiration. The power in the room had changed hands, and everyone knew it. As they reached the doors, my father turned one last time. "You've made your point," he said bitterly. "Enjoy your empire." "I will," I said, "without you." The doors closed behind them, and with that sound, a chapter of my life ended. The ballroom remained frozen in awe. Then, slowly, the pianist began to play again, the soft notes of "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas" floating through the air. Nora, ever the professional, signaled for the staff to resume serving drinks. I stood still for a moment, taking it all in, the lights, the snow, the hush of respect that now followed me wherever I turned. For the first time, I wasn't the forgotten daughter or the girl left behind in a small Georgia house. I was the woman who had built her own kingdom, one polished floor at a time. Evelyn came up beside me. "Are you all right, Miss Cole?" I smiled. "More than all right." She nodded, returning to her duties, and I walked toward the massive Christmas tree. Its crystal ornaments caught the light, scattering reflections across the floor like tiny fragments of a new beginning. I took a deep breath. The weight of years, the rejection, the silence, the proving, lifted from my shoulders. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. What I felt was freedom. Tonight, I thought I didn't lose a family. I reclaimed myself. And that realization, brighter than any chandelier, was worth more than all the billions I owned. The doors closed behind them with a final, echoing thud. Outside, the snow was falling harder now, thick white flakes drifting under the streetlights. Through the tall glass of the lobby, I could see my family gathered on the steps, their expensive coats doing little to protect them from the wind off the Chicago River. For years, I had been the one left standing in the cold. Tonight, it was their turn. My father turned first, his expression a mix of pride and disbelief. Cynthia spoke to him, her voice frantic but muffled by the glass. Lila clutched his arm, crying openly now, her silver shoes sinking into the snow. I stood inside the warmth of my own hotel, watching the scene like it belonged to someone else's life. But it didn't. It was mine. They said they were sorry. They said they loved me. They said they were confused. The same words that had always come too late. I opened the doors, letting the cold air whip against my face, and walked toward them, my coat draped over my shoulders like a quiet crown. I accept your words, I told them calmly, but I do not accept your ways. My father tried to speak, but I raised a hand to stop him. You taught me to measure people by what they build, I said. Well, look around you, Dad. I built this. I did it without your name, without your help, and without your approval. You told me once that I'd never make it without you. You were wrong. I turned to Marcus. Finish it. He nodded once. The guards moved forward, guiding them away from the entrance. There were no shouts this time, no last insults. Just the soft crunch of snow under their shoes as they disappeared down the steps and into the night. I watched until they were gone, until the only sound left was the faint hum of the wind and the distant laughter of guests inside who knew nothing of the storm that had just passed. When I walked back into the lobby, the warmth wrapped around me again. The pianist had started playing, slow and gentle, as if the hotel itself understood that the hard part was over. Nora Briggs, my event director, approached with a mug of hot cocoa, the steam curling into the air between us. It's done, she said softly. I took the mug and smiled. Yes, I said. It's finally done. Upstairs, in my office, a room of glass and quiet, I sat at my desk overlooking the glowing city. Chicago stretched before me, alive and endless, the river lights flickering like liquid gold. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who folded sheets in the hotel basement, who counted change for bus fare, who used to cry quietly in a rented room, wondering if she would ever be seen. That girl was still here somewhere, but she had learned to stand taller. She had learned that power didn't have to roar. Sometimes it could whisper and still shake the earth. I picked up my pen and began signing the year-end bonus checks for my staff. Every name mattered to me. Every signature was a promise that their hard work was worth something real. I signed them in dollars, not out of vanity, but out of pride that I had earned every cent honestly. When I was done, I called our broker in London to confirm my secondary account in pounds, a small reminder that my reach now stretched across both America and Europe. Money had never been my end goal. It was the freedom it bought that mattered, the ability to choose my own life, to write my own story without asking permission from anyone again. Before I left for the night, I sent a message to Peter Vaughn in Boston, the man who had once told me that success comes quietly to those who never stop working for it. Thank you, I wrote. You were right. I found my way. Then I leaned back in my chair, looking around the office that felt more like home than any house I'd ever lived in. It was nearly midnight when I made my way down to the lobby. The party had quieted, guests slipping away into the cold, the echoes of laughter fading like distant bells. Nora was waiting near the tree, her coat on and her hair dusted with a bit of tinsel. She smiled when she saw me. Owner, she teased gently. Woman, I corrected with a grin. That's the title I like most. She laughed, and for a moment, the world felt easy. We wished each other good night, and I stepped out into the crisp winter air. The driver opened the car door, but I waved him off. "Not tonight," I said. "I want to walk." The streets were nearly empty, the city quiet in its Christmas stillness. My heels clicked against the pavement as I walked toward my apartment on Lakeshore Drive, the lights of the river shimmering beside me. The air smelled of pine and snow and freedom. When I reached home, I poured the last of the cocoa into a porcelain mug and stood by the window. The view stretched far, high-rises gleaming, snow drifting like ash, the lake dark and calm. I thought of Birch Lane, of the house where I'd once sat on the porch swing dreaming of a world bigger than that narrow street. I thought of my mother's voice, gentle and wise, telling me to be patient. "Your wings are growing." I realized then that she'd been right. The pain, the rejection, the years of being unseen, those were the growing pains of my wings. And now, finally, I could fly. My phone buzzed once, a message from Lila. Just 2 words, "I'm sorry." I stared at it for a long moment, then deleted it. Not out of cruelty, but because I no longer needed apologies to move forward. Some doors are meant to stay closed. Outside, a flake of snow melted against the window pane. I smiled to myself. For the first time, I didn't feel like the girl who had been thrown out. I felt like the woman who had built the place she'd always belonged. I curled up on the couch, the lights of the city flickering like a lullaby. Tomorrow would bring new guests, new meetings, and new challenges. But tonight, I had peace. Peace earned, not given. And so, this is my story. A house that raised me, a hotel that I built, and a night when I finally stopped seeking love from those who never knew how to give it. If you ever walk into the Aurora Grand on Christmas Eve, you'll smell pine and cocoa, you'll hear soft piano music, and you'll see the reflection of a woman standing quietly by the lobby window. That's me. The owner, the survivor, the daughter who became her own legacy.